5:30. So the first thing on the agenda, any additions or changes to the agenda? Alice? No? Okay. Public comment.
This is going to be, if someone is going to be addressing the recovery plan, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like it is. Tim, do you have any additions or changes? Tim, do you have any additions or changes to the agenda? No? Okay. All right, public comment. None, okay. Moving on to review and approve meeting minutes from August 17th. Alice or Tim, did you have anything that was an issue? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve it? Okay. Alice and Tim, you second? Okay, all those in favor, thumbs up. All right, it's unanimous. All right, so now we're on to new business, 5.1, proficiency-based learning 101.
All right, so for this part here, I'm going to be talking about proficiencies. This is a tricky subject because there's such a wide variety of them. So some of you on this call might not be familiar with proficiencies at all. So I'm going to be doing this really basic, and some of you might be really experienced, and this might be a little repetitive. So just be patient, and we'll go through it, and then we'll answer questions at the end. All right, so everybody's with us. So, okay, basically that's it. All right. The next thing is proficiencies by names. So they're called many things in different places. Some people call them non-negotiables. Some people call them competencies. Some people call them masteries, good teaching. Some people call it best practice, but they're all under the guise of proficiencies. Before proficiencies were here, we were teaching proficiency-based learning. We just didn't call it that, right? So I just wanted to bring that up to everybody's speed. Curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And we touched on this a little bit last meeting, but I just want to repeat it again because it's worth repeating. Curriculum is not programs, right? Curriculum are the materials that you're covering in the class, those essential standards that we want every kid to learn. Program is like a book that can help you get to that curriculum. It's a kind of a general example, but the curriculum is all tied into the recovery plan, the Berry 35 recovery plan, the strategic plan, best practice, best research known what we need to do to get our kids to move to the next level. And it's an AOE requirement. The Agency of Education requires us to teach using proficiencies. So just to give you a little background on it. Instruction is what do we do in the classroom to help us reach those proficiencies? What practices do we put into place to get to those levels? And then assessments are all tied to the proficiencies to see, are we meeting those proficiencies or not? And where are the different levels of kids? And what can we do to move them to the next level? So that's curriculum, instruction, and assessment. That's basically what I do. All right, so I need a volunteer. Is there anyone here who wants to volunteer? I know you don't even know what you're volunteering for, but is there a volunteer? A willing one? All right, Alice, you are the teacher, Alice. Okay. I am the student. And I have made this beautiful model in my classroom, and you are going to grade me. So go ahead and grade me.
Well, first of all, what is it a model of?
Aha, good question. Keep going.
How long did it take you to do that?
Okay.
What skills do you need to do that?
Okay.
Can you explain it to the class?
Keep going.
Let's see, where else? Where am I? Can you explain it? Can you discuss it with the class? Do you know what it means? You created.
Okay.
You recognize what you created it, what you made it from, what you created it out of.
Okay.
Can
How
you
about-
tell us? Can you tell us?
It's not fair, Alice, because you have experience in this. Just give me a grade on this.
I'll give you a grade on it. Well, boy, that's a toughie, because without knowing what the accomplishment was supposed to be, it's hard to grade it.
Right. Yes. Awesome. You're exactly right, Alice. You don't know, was this an art assignment? Was this a math assignment? Was I trying to make a three-dimensional shape? Was I trying to represent colors, right? You don't know. We don't know what grade level or anything like that. And in the old days, right, when I was in school, you would get a grade on something like this. You'd get, okay, you got an A, you got a B, you got a C. That would be your grade. But it really wouldn't tell you much, right? It wouldn't tell you what the assignment was and what the learning was and all those questions that Alice was asking you. How do we get to the next level, right? What are you doing? What materials did it take you? All that reflection, all that feedback, that's best practice. That's proficiency-based learning. So now we're going to do it another way. I need another volunteer. Who wants to volunteer this time? Anyone?
I'm happy to, Mary Ellen, if it would be helpful.
You are the teacher, Chris. Are you
Okay.
ready? I'm going to put up on the screen now. Maybe I am. Not that one. I'm going to put a different one up. I'm going to put up on the screen something for you, and you are going to give me a grade. Let's see if this works. I know what I can do. I can do it this way. Maybe I am. All right, so now I'm going to give you a rubric, if I can get it going up here, and you are going to grade me. I'll tell you what the rubric says while we're waiting for this to come up here.
Okay.
You are going to grade me on a rubric. The proficiency level is to create a model of a sphere, right? And we always try to teach to the distinguished level, and this distinguished level would be to create a sphere and a rectangular prism. Now, this is what I created. The proficiency is, can I create a model of a sphere that represents all the attributes of a sphere? So that's what you're going to be grading me on. If I was developing, I could create a sphere, but it might not be precise. It might not have all the attributes. It might have some pieces missing or not exactly representing what we want to teach. And if I'm emerging, I can create a shape, right? But it might not be a sphere. Okay. So how would you grade me on this, Chris, knowing that criteria? And we actually have a rubric. It's not a real rubric. It's one I made just for this example so you could see it really simply. That has 4 areas. And again, we start with distinguished and then we go down to emerging.
Okay. Well, I mean, if I'm looking at that model you put together, and proficiency means you basically can create a 3-dimensional model with the attributes of a sphere, I would say you've reached proficiency. You didn't reach distinction because it's not within, or just say rectangular.
It would be a sphere and a rectangular prism, right?
So you're at least able to demonstrate in creating that model that you could make a 3-dimensional representation with orbit, orb-like characteristics.
So you can hear the difference between the 2 gradings. One is you just get a letter grade or a number grade, and the other one you're getting specific feedback based on where you are on that rubric. So this can address kids who are beyond proficiency, kids who want to go above and beyond the distinguished group. It also can address kids who are behind the proficiency and what do they need to do to go to the next level, right? So that is what proficiency-based learning is. Any questions on that? I know that was pretty simplified, but I was trying to make something that could kind of be like translated into other areas. So you heard what Chris was saying, clear learning objectives. That rubric that I was reading from to tell him clearly identified what those learning objectives were. There was always a reach to push for distinguished, but we're looking at proficiency. Specific activity levels, 4 areas broken down to help kids know very clearly, it's all written in student-friendly words, family-friendly words, what they need to do to move from one level to the next. So you have student agency. It's an older kid, even younger kids can take ownership of the learning, and they know what they need to do to move to the next step. Parents can look at it. They can see what does it take to move to the next step. It's the same activity for all levels of kids. It's just where are they at, and we take them where they're at to move them to the next level. It addresses all levels of learning, and there's clear directions on how to move forward in the learning. That's what proficiency is all about. So here at Berry Union Unified School District, we really strive for proficiency. And the good news is a lot of work has been done here over the past few years. They have been working with the Greater School Partnership at all levels to really fully develop and implement the proficiency system. Are they completed yet? No, they're not completed, but they have a good start on it. And a lot of the hard work is done. In that, if you take a look at the high school, all of the classes are tied to the standards, and all of the assessments are reported out based on where those students are with the standards. So that is fantastic. That's the hard work. The next step of what we're going to do is we're going to prioritize those standards and create the essential proficiencies so that we can create flexible pathways and alternative ways to meet those requirements to get to proficiencies other than the traditional route of going through the classrooms. Renee.
As of right now, for the high school, how many, I don't know what language you guys are using, but how many proficiencies or, the next level up, not the individuals, but like the graduation requirements, where are you guys at?
So that's the next step in what we have to do. So every class has their proficiencies outlined for their specific class. So the next step is to create that. What is the graduation requirements? What are the priority proficiencies that we need for the high school?
So how are kids graduating now?
They're doing it by going through the classes.
Okay, so it's all embedded?
Yes. Yep, it's
Okay.
completely embedded. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that alternative system so that we have other paths for students to do. Now, we do have other paths now. I'm not saying that we don't. I don't want to make a misstep here, because we have students who go through the dual enrollment program, the VAST program. These are all alternative ways to get through graduation. Early college entrance, some virtual high school classes. These are all options that students have to meet graduation requirements. But the proficiencies that I'm talking about will give us an alternative to the traditional classroom route. That's what I'm saying. Josh, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just had a statement about the grading, going the proficiency to emerging versus the letter grades.
Right.
As a parent, I've always found that extremely frustrating because I go in for open house or whatever, I ask the teacher during first semester, like, how are they doing right now? And my answer is like, they're on track for the end of the year. Like, but yes, how are they doing right now? Traditionally, when you had the letter grades, I could see at the first quarter, say had a kid had straight A's, but she had a B in one class. I could say, well, maybe spend more time on that subject because you can do it because you're finding everything else. And of course, the teacher would say they're on track for the end of the year. But, trying to get the best out of every class that I can. How can we address that? Because I know I'm not the only parent that is extremely frustrated with that whole setup, because it's really hard to see where your kid's at during the year. Because saying that you're going to be on track for the end of the year, I think that's fine, but I want the best out of every subject.
Right. Hold that thought, Josh, because we're going to get to that at 5.4. We're going to be talking about the reporting out system part of it. So right now we're going to concentrate more on the other end, on the proficiency end. And again, for years now, I mean, at least 10 years ago when I was a teacher, I taught using proficiencies. We didn't call it proficiencies. I used traditional grading, but it was this type of teaching. And the students had this type of learning in the classroom, and that's what we used to promote learning. Sonia.
Thanks. So my question, I have a couple of questions, and these are personal examples. So what happens when you have a kid who's struggling to meet proficiency and has to go in and retest and retest and retest and retest to just pass a class? From a personal, my own daughter, she nearly failed the class because she couldn't pass one standard. And it really impacted her mental health. So how do you create some kind of a system? I mean, basically, if you looked at it in a more traditional sense, she, got 95% of the material and was proficient in it. And then the one standard, she was getting tutoring and she could do it in the tutoring. And when she went in to do the assessment, she couldn't pass the assessment. So how do we help kids like that? Because her exact words were, I felt really stupid because I could not pass this. So how do we help those kids?
Right. And you're talking
Mary Ellen, before you answer that, I need some clarification for me from what you're saying, Sonia. So Mary Ellen, is it that Sonia, you're talking about high school level or middle school?
Yes, high school.
In order for a student to earn credit in a course, do they have to be proficient at every single performance indicator in the class?
No, they don't.
If they're required,
there are certain ones that they do have to be proficient in.
Okay. And so for the overall course score, is that calculated by all of them or just the required ones?
All of them, I believe. All of them. Yeah. So that is the reason, Sonia, why we need to do this next step that I am doing with the high school right now. Identifying those essential priorities so that if we had that list, we could meet them in an alternative way other than through the traditional classroom. And the student can still succeed and they can still graduate, if that makes sense. So then you don't have to keep taking that assessment over and over again. You can do it in an alternative way.
So you're saying in an alternative way, which might be working with your tutor and showing your tutor that you can do the work, and then that would count even though you can't pass an assessment.
And Chris, do you want to talk about that?
I was just going to add it's just looking at different ways to assess the learning. So that's what it is. If it was, I don't know what it was specifically your daughter was struggling with, Sonia, but obviously there are some kids, maybe some people on the screen who struggle with written tests, for example. There are different ways to demonstrate the knowledge and to show proficiency. I think that's what you're getting at, right, Mary Ellen?
Yeah.
That's the key. That's the key
Yeah.
piece, so that it can meet kids in different learning styles as well.
Right. And I think that since your daughter has been there, Sonia, I don't know how long ago it's been, but they have created a PASS system, which is an extra support system to help students who are not meeting the proficiencies, to give them extra support at different times of the day. So they have created, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Chris.
Just that it's every 3 weeks. They're basically checking in on where kids are at in terms of proficiency in various classes. So every 3 weeks they get opportunities to get that support. It's pretty remarkable, actually. I think they just did their first round of it, but a lot of kids avail themselves of it. It's open to many. It's great.
No, it was absolutely in place when my daughter was in school, but it was it's interesting the way that you present it in a curriculum meeting. It sounds so lovely, and then the way that a child moves through it, it's not lovely at all. And so I just share it with you because the experience as a parent is so different, because the way that the day was structured has changed somewhat, but there were some bumps in the road, but it was the continuation of, I have to go in and I'm struggling to pass this and I feel really stupid, and only the kids who are struggling have to go in and all the other kids get a day off, and it's just it's difficult. So I just think that for us as adults, it sounds like, oh, this is a great system and we're helping kids get proficient. But from a kid's perspective, it's a different, they're having different thoughts about it. So that's all I'm just sharing with you, because I think that it's important to understand how that is having some impact on our students.
And sometimes that's because there's only one way to get there. That's what we have right now. You have to take the classes to get there. And what I'm proposing is, by identifying those proficiencies, those priorities, you could create alternative ways to get there instead of having to go to that class and doing that over and over and over and over again, right?
But if it's just one proficiency that's keeping her from getting credit for the course, do the teachers have training to be able to, so she doesn't have to keep taking the test over and over again, other ways that they can show their proficiency, be it through a project, through a paper, through a presentation? Like, is that something that the teachers have training in? And if not, will they be getting any?
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That if you had a system built in there, you could show evidence of that learning in alternative ways.
In theory, yes, I think that's true. But this was math. It's a little harder just
know.
because you're not going to necessarily write a paper about, you know, this one concept that you're supposed to be learning. You might, I think she understood it in on some levels, but she just couldn't, every time she wanted to take the assessment, and it was a different assessment every single time. Mm-hmm. The teacher actually ran out of assessments to give her. That's how many times she went in.
Yeah.
And so it just became this very difficult. The only reason I bring it up, we're past it now, we're done, but I bring it up because I want to make sure that other kids aren't in that same, aren't stuck in that same situation.
Alice?
A question, rather than on an individual basis, if students are meeting proficiency, have we set a goal for the entire system that, for example, we want 80% of our third graders to be proficient in the 9 times tables, things like that, to show where the whole group, as the school as a whole, is moving forward? Is that part and parcel of your work that you're doing?
Part of it is identifying those essentials from pre-kindergarten through graduation. So we have already identified those essentials in 3rd grade. We have them in pre-K, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. In the high school, it's all done by classes. And when we finish with this work that we're doing right now, we'll have identified the proficiencies in high school the same way. So once we have them clearly written out and marked, and by the way, we're putting them on the website so everybody can see them and all the teachers can access them, then we will be able to check the data to see how many of our students are meeting those standards and where do we stand with them, right? So yes, that is part of the process. And as the process evolves, those could move up.
And so what I think also part of my question is, so if there is a known goal that we're looking for, and I'm just going to set it at 80% because it sounds nice. But if we're saying that we want our school to be 80% proficient, does that translate down into the activities of teaching, the instructional methods, moving toward that goal to make sure that the grade, the school, and eventually the district, we can say is 80% proficient or XYZ proficient?
Definitely. We will, maybe not in exactly those words, Alice, but we will be using data to identify where the needs are in the classroom based on the essential standards. So if we're uncovering that in 3rd grade, we notice there's a lack of multiplication skills, then we know our instructional practices have to be to incorporate multiple ways in order to address the need to get those kids up to multiplication. I mean, that's kind of a simple example. It's not that black and white, but yes, that is exactly the purpose of them. So during our in-service day, we have one coming up on October 8th. We have pulled the data that we just assessed every student on from pre-K up to see where are they right now and what instructional practices do we need to put into place to move those kids along. Yes, Alice.
So just to continue that discussion, so we're looking at the child, the class, the grade, the school,
The district. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to be sure.
Yes.
So I want to come back because I don't feel like I heard an answer. As far as, do the teachers currently have training to be able to do alternative assessments for students that are struggling with showing proficiency in the one way that's being used in the classroom?
I mean, and that's a great question, Renee. Like I said, I know they work extensively with the Greater School Partnership on proficiencies. I would be surprised if they didn't, but we do have new teachers since then. So maybe, Chris, you and I could go back and double check with Brenda and get the specifics on that. I can't answer for every single teacher, but we can find that out for you. And
yeah,
so,
if you're asking specifically about the high school, we'd have to get back to you on that. We can check in with Brenda on it, especially these last couple of years with some of the turnover.
Yeah. I think it's important to keep that in the forefront because, especially in high school, folks can get in their routines and do some of the same stuff, and it can be easy to say, well, here's another test, it's just different numbers. Here's another test, here's different. And I can explain it to you, but I can't write it down or something like that. So making sure that the teachers have that skill set, because if they went to college and, well, certainly when I graduated, we didn't do any of that stuff when I went to school to be a teacher. And so anybody older than me is going to be in that same situation if they haven't continued that training.
And Sonia, it is possible in math. I was a math interventionist at the high school, and you can model those math formulas, calculations, proficiencies in multiple ways. You don't have to just take a test. So it is possible. Are we doing it yet? Maybe not, but it is definitely a path that can be moved towards. So I think that's the end of our proficiency talk now. Are we ready to move on to 5.2?
Yep, let's go ahead. 5.2 is roles for curriculum work.
So this was something Alice asked for at our last meeting. What are the roles? How does the organizational chart? So we have put this on the website. So if you go on BUUSD.org and you go under the departments and curriculum, and you will see a chart there that outlines the curriculum roles. And basically, it's very simple. The superintendent oversees the curriculum area. And then under the superintendent is me, the director of curriculum. And then under me are the two coaches. We have a math coach and a literacy coach. In addition to that, we have an administrative assistant for the curriculum office. And we have an MTSS coach, which is the person who's handling our recovery plan and who's handling our data systems and setting up MTSS system for the whole school. And that's basically it. That's the whole roles for the curriculum department. Are we ready to go on to 5.3?
Alice or Tib, do you have any questions about that?
No, I'm fine. And I think that it will begin to see how students are involved in the process with anyone who might be their primary teacher, might be a support person to reach that proficient level. I think that's very important to know how we're going to get kiddos there.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, let's move to 5.3, process for approving curriculum materials across the district.
And I think this might have come from
you. Hold on one second. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tim.
The only thing I keep running up against is students that can't do basic math, students that really have no comprehension, that their spelling is atrocious. And it just tells me that something is not working. Something somewhere. If I go to a student and I can pick 2 tomorrow and say what's half of a 4, and they can't tell me, then something is wrong. The system is broken. So even my autistic kid can tell me what half of a 4th is, but not a student. That's too hard. So something is not right here. And I don't know whether it's the assessment or kids just get out of the assessment, or who even knows. But this is not getting us what we want. So anyway, that was my point.
Thanks for sharing, Tim. All right, so process for approving curriculum materials across the district, 5.3.
Okay, and I think this was something Alice might have requested as well a while ago. Wanting to know, what is the process if we are purchasing curriculum materials? What do we go through in order to get to that process? Now, this is not, are we buying pencils for the classroom or basic supplies? These are things that we use in our instructional practices to move along instruction. So we've created a list. We are in the process of sending it out to every teacher. We've already sent it out to all the administrators. We're already using it. We pilot it with a few people to just check and see, are there any, pieces in it that needs to be revisited. And it seems to be working well. So the first step is to identify what is the need. What curriculum materials are needed? Again, not general supplies, but these are curriculum materials. We compile a list and we check the costs of the materials. And we have to, if it's grant funded, check in 3 different sources and find the best rate. It's called procurement for anything that we purchase in the curriculum office. The first party would sign the form saying, yes, this is what we need. When they sign it, they hand it over to the curriculum office. And this could be the MTSS coordinator, the coaches, the math and literacy coaches, or me, the director of curriculum. And there's a series of questions that we go through to make sure, is this purchase necessary? And is it something that we're going to follow through with? So the first thing is the purchase necessary, right? The second thing is how does this material relate to our instructional practices that we're putting in the classroom? So we don't want something that's going to counteract all of the coaching and instructional practices and best practice that we know is going to move students learning further, that's going to derail us from that situation. We want to know, is there a similar type of material already in place? Is this a one teacher thing? Is it going to be common across the grade cluster in that building? Is it going to be common across both buildings? Is it something that we need to align vertically, horizontally? Some of the classroom already have it? Is there a common practice? Yeah, I just said that, vertically and horizontally. And then finally, what are the resources available to get these materials? So if it is just a one-time purchase, one classroom thing, that's a smaller amount than if we start this purchase, do we have to buy one for every grade level and every classroom, is going to be a much larger purchase. So these are the decisions we make before we approve it. Once that process is approved, then it goes to the building administrator. The building administrator has to sign off saying that they are approving it. And then it gets sent, if it's grant funded, to me, the director of curriculum. And then we start that process here where we go through the official procurement process and we create the purchase order and we do it if it's approved through all those pieces. We have a special form to do that with. Any questions on that? Alice.
Yeah, I have a question about if a teacher,
yeah,
suddenly has a inkling because they read about some program
right.
in a magazine or on the internet or whatever, and suddenly comes in and says, "This is a prepackaged curriculum on, I don't know, doing math through raising chickens." Something like that. But how does that process if someone suddenly has a brainstorm that they would like to use this canned curriculum?
Okay, so 2 things. One, we have a process for our math curriculum. We don't want to deviate from that. We know that it's best practice. It's followed. The AOE is using it in other schools across the state. We have a differentiated section. We have a very, very strong math program. We will not deviate from that program. Now, that being said, we have supported classrooms to do things like raise chickens and use that in their instructional practices, but that's in addition to the basic math instruction that we're offering that's common across all things. Go ahead, Chris.
Just wanted to add that, across grade levels, discussions like what you brought up, Alice, are really done at the team level. Mm-hmm. And certainly in my time at Barry City, there isn't any real freelancing like what you described. I mean, there's lots of Now, that doesn't mean, to Mary Ellen's point, there might be a teacher or a small group of teachers across grades who might want to be doing some specific outdoor projects and work together across grades. That's different than actually ordering curricula. And my experience in 3+ years, I haven't seen any of that. And there is a quality control process to ensure that doesn't happen, both within teams and outside of teams when it gets to the principal's level or to Mary Ellen's level, just so we know.
Alice?
I guess I'm a throwback to the days of when Orton Gillingham and Wilson and whole language and phonetics were all, topsy-turvy in the curriculum field. And various teachers would want to change their classroom to a whole language classroom or to a Orton Gillingham classroom. And there were always questions of how are we going to fit that into the whole scope of what we're doing in the building and in the district. So that's what prompted my concern was we have those, just as Chris referred to, those freelancers that might be wanting to deviate from what we're actually doing and keeping the data on.
Yes. Thank you, Alice. Josh, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I had a question. I mean, this is a real life situation for me. My oldest daughter, for example, her ELA class, she did really well at homeschool last year. She got way ahead. So in ELA, they recognize that, she's a further ahead where she is. So they gave her a different book to have her go read in the hallway with another student. And they said, pick your own project. I was wondering, in this curriculum, is there room to actually take these kids that might be further ahead, put them somewhere and actually give them a challenge and keep pushing them ahead to get as much as we can out of them? Because when I heard of that situation, I wasn't super impressed. It just sounded kind of, well, lack of a better term, just a little bit lazy on it and kind of failing her. It didn't really seem equitable to kids that are, maybe a little ahead in some subjects, might be behind in others, but to keep challenging them on what they kind of keep pushing them forward so they don't get so bored. So is there something in this curriculum that could allow for that?
I think that by setting up the system, like I was talking about earlier, identifying those priorities, creating those learning progressions for each of those priorities, that is a way that the student can even identify themselves how to get to that distinguished level and what they need to do to move to the next level. So I think that could help address some of those things. And I think also, I don't think we're there yet. So I think that's the place where we're moving to this year. Renee?
Yeah, kind of to go with, I think what Josh might be going towards a little bit is, has there been any work as far as the instructional blocks and what those should look like? So like, for example, all the teachers, they do direct instruction for the first 15 minutes, then students break out and they're working on stuff at their level. And so then, and the teacher can rotate around and support the low, the middle, and the top.
Exactly. We do have that very much structured setup in that we have a certain block of time. And this is mostly literacy and math, I believe you're talking about, where they do the general gen ed classroom, and they do the specifics, and then they have, we call it math menu time or lit menu time. And what that is very differentiated. The students are broken up by groups by where they can work. The teachers go around and work with those students, and they're the first line of intervention. The interventionists come in the classroom and they work with the group of students, and also the special educators come in and they work with a group of students.
Yeah, and I remember the presentation on that.
Yeah.
And so, but I guess what I'm hearing is, I'm wondering if it's being monitored for fidelity, because if, Josh's daughter's experience is that, then that's not what it sounds like is happening.
Yeah.
So is there some sort of system to help support teachers with like walkthroughs and stuff to make sure that that's happening and support them if it's not?
We do have walkthroughs. We do have coaches that go into every classroom. We do have systems in place. I can't speak specifically to that. Chris and I can do a little more research on that and also bring that back to the group. But as far as I know, there are systems in place to address those areas. Yes, Sonia.
So my question is, I guess, just sort of piggybacking on or not even a question, just a comment. I remember, and maybe this is easier with some particular subjects than others. But, you know, when my daughter was a freshman in English, she was in an English class. There was no honors track. There was no, you know, general ed, college level track or anything. And you were in the same English class. If you wanted to do honors, you had to do, you know, you read the same book, but you had to do extra work. You had to answer extra questions. You had more work to do if you were doing the honors track versus just the regular track. So is that something that does that only happen at the high school level?
I think Chris can talk to that because you were in the high school, right, Chris? I know they have AP classes now, which is all high honors sections.
Well, I haven't been in the high school in 8 years. I haven't been at Spalding in a while. What you just described, Sonia, was very typical when I started as a high school teacher 30 years ago. And, you know, I think, you know, I can't speak to, you know, whether that's happening at the high school now. But I think what we're talking about here with all of this stuff is just really working on differentiation and making sure we meet the needs of all kids in the classroom and making sure that that those practices are in place. I mean, I know that that was stuff we were working on when I was an assistant principal at Spalding, working hard on that stuff to improve practice. It was certainly in play at Barry City when I was there, you know, with our work with Math Menu and Lit Menu, which is pretty much with what you brought up, Renee, is exactly what those programs are. So I don't know, and I certainly can't speak to Josh's daughter's experience. I mean, there are situations where you would have kids working in different areas, but the teacher would be checking in on those kids on the work they're doing. That might have been what was going on there. I don't know. That was up at Barrytown, I presume. But
yeah, it was Barrytown. They're putting a hallway. She said the most exciting thing that happened was another teacher asked her to hold a door open so he can come back inside. So it was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth a conversation with that teacher to find out what the method was there. But yeah, what you described, Sonia, is a very old school approach. Even when I was a 23-year-old teacher, I didn't like it. And we're talking in 1988, 89. I never felt great about that. That should not be the general practice.
It used to be the belief that you would give people who are accelerating more work to do, right? We know now that that's not the best thing. The best thing to do is to challenge them, to keep that same concept and go deeper into it. That's what needs to happen.
So maybe that's actually what's happening in the classroom for these high school levels. But I guess my point is couldn't we also be doing the same thing in, you know, Josh's daughter's classroom?
Definitely.
Well, we should be. That should be what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think that was everything for process for approving curriculum materials.
So it looks like Tim has his hand up.
Okay, Tim.
So we know that this process is not working because I've had to remove my own child out of the school. So what is the ulterior motive, or what do you need to do when you've reported this 3 or 4 times and it's falling on deaf ears at like 3 or 4 different levels? How high up do you call? Do I call Biden? See, the frustration is this. You guys aren't getting this. Some kids are really, really smart. And I don't think we have a system in place to capture this and challenge these kids in a way that makes sense. And I know you're after the herd and what the herd's doing and least common denominator, and I'm really sorry for that. But some kids really need a challenge. Don't everybody speak at once.
Thanks, Tim.
So it's just hard to respond to that because I just don't agree with what you're saying, and I don't fully understand.
Okay, would you like for me to bring my daughter down to the meeting right now? I'll do it. Okay, we're good.
I think Andrea has her hand raised.
I do. I'll just throw in a parent's 2 cents regarding the high school. My students preferred when there were separate honors courses. When they did the embedded honors, they felt that they were being slowed down because the teacher had to teach at a certain pace to make sure she could reach everybody. And so, yes, there was extra work that they could do to receive the honors grade, but a lot of that was self-taught, and they just felt that when they experienced regular honors programs, they got much more out of it. And, they just learned a lot more because they could move at a faster pace and they could delve deeper into subjects. One thing that was beneficial with the embedded was, I think, they enjoyed the time they spent, because sometimes the kids who are excelling get to spend time assisting students who are struggling. And I know my kids enjoyed helping other students. And that's a good skill to learn, and it's giving back to the community. But overall, they did feel that they would have preferred, honors classes that they could take that were more advanced. So that's just their 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think Josh has his hand raised.
I was about to say the same thing as Andrea. Is hoping for some more advanced classes, but I'd also like to put out there, like, I understand it's only the first month of school. These teachers are having probably a harder time this year than in years past. So because kids are going to have a much more wider range of ability this year, because some kids fell way behind last year, some kids went way ahead. So I get that, and I'm not asking for a fix tomorrow with all this stuff. I understand teachers are going to have to take their time to kind of assess everybody and make a kind of a plan on the fly. And I want to make sure there's room for that as well. It's just, yeah, we definitely need some sort of programs to kind of challenge these kids that are ahead. And I was still taking care of kids that are behind, trying to get them to catch up to where they need to be and maybe even further.
I think it's interesting if you hear what Tim is saying, you hear what Andrea is saying, you hear what Josh is saying, and Sonia is saying about their children. They're all different. All the needs are very different, right? And I think that speaks to, we cannot have one teacher stand up in front of the room and talk the whole time and lecture on a subject. We know that doesn't work anymore, right? You have to have student ownership. And I think this is one of the biggest things we learned from the COVID experience last year, is that the students need to take more ownership on their learning. The learning needs to be meeting the kids where they're at and providing multiple avenues to reach that learning, because one student might prefer it extra work and doing things on their own. Another student might not prefer that extra work. Some student might need it repeated, or a challenge or enrichment. So I think we're hearing all the different scenarios of what happens in a typical classroom. And I think you're right, Josh. I think this year we're facing even a wider disparity in the needs, which even points to the fact that we cannot stand in front of the classroom and lecture for the whole class time. That just doesn't work anymore. It didn't work before, right? Unless you were an auditory student and you learned that way. There were many kids who did not succeed in school in the past because there was only one way. It was either that way or you don't fit in. And I think we need to create those alternative ways to learn. That's my soapbox. I don't usually do that, but sorry, I get passionate about it. Any other questions on that section? Sonia has to leave the meeting. All right, thank you, Sonia. We will see you soon.
All right, let's move on to 5.4, current reporting system.
So the current reporting system, again, we're going to just kind of go over this in general. There's a lot of things I want to tell you about that's on the website. So if you look on the website, it could answer a lot of your questions, but I want to go over some of the highlights. Every report card in the school is standards based. So that means those standards that are required, the Common Core standards that are required for that grade level, are on the report card, and that's what's being assessed and reported out. In the high school, like Chris was saying, they get reports out every 3 weeks. So students really get a full, consistent, constant feedback on where they are and what, if any, extra support is needed for that student. Were you going to say something, Chris?
I was just thinking as you were saying that, and Sonia's not here now, but to the point, and this is something that I was just talking to Brenda about this the other day, to her point that it all sounds really great to us every 3 weeks. but it can actually be kind of nerve-wracking to kids. And they try to be very aware of how, over-reporting can kind of keep kids in a perpetually anxious state, and you got to be really careful of that. So it's just interesting. That struck me when Sonia made that comment about how when we describe these approaches, it really does sound like best practice, but we got to always remember the perspective of the student going through it. So I just wanted to bring that up. When the whole pass system, which is very new to me, I've learned a lot about it this summer. I had those immediate reactions, like, is this almost too much? But not the way they approach it. They're really trying to make sure they're meeting kids where they're at and providing the support as it's needed. So I just wanted to point that out.
The other thing is that students also can access the reporting out system through Google Suites in many classrooms in the high school and in other grades, and that families can check into Google Suites, students can check into Google Suites to know exactly where they are at any time. Andrea, I see your hand raised.
Well, yeah, I was just going to weigh in on a little history of the 3-week reporting. It used to be that it wasn't done that frequent. And what they found was happening was students were waiting to the very end of the semester. And then all of a sudden, when they realized they weren't going to pass, they had all these standards and all this work they had to make up. So they switched it to every 3 weeks so that they could keep kids on track and make sure they didn't fall too far behind and didn't hit the end of the marking period and find out, they've got oodles of work to do. So that was the strategy behind that.
Yes. Thank you, Andrea. All right. So there are frequent reporting out, and there's multiple ways to report out. For the elementary school, there's actually a multi-page document on the website, if you look at that, to explain exactly how grades are done. So I think this is one of the questions that you've been asking, Renee, is, all right, is it that you have not reached that yet and there's not expected to be any grade? So on here, they call that administrative exemption. Or is it that they're just developing or beginning in that proficiency? So this is where you can tell the difference between, is it, that the student didn't do anything, or is it that they haven't gotten to that assessment yet, or where are they standing on that? The same thing is on the high school. They use different symbols for it, but it's the same exact process where they tell you, have they not met that standard yet? They haven't addressed that standard yet, or if the student hasn't provided any evidence to meet that standard yet. On the website under Spalding, there's a whole section on Spalding grading, on the weighted grades for the AP classes, on how they use a grade point average, like a traditional way that we used to grade. There's a rubric for transferable skills if people have questions about that. And there's a whole section on how colleges are now looking for proficiencies as part of their acceptance package and when they accept people in college. So that,
Mary Ellen, how at the high school level, how are the final course grades calculated?
there is a section on that. I can read that to you actually. How are the GPAs calculated, you mean?
No, like US history, I got partially proficient at the end of the semester. How is that calculated? Do the teachers calculate it? Is it a straight average? Is it a decaying average?
Right. So let's see what it says. That would be like a 3.5. Student access, no evidence. Yeah, I'd have to find that out. Remind me, Chris, to check in with Brenda on that one too. Like what mathematical formula do they use to calculate that average? Are they doing the decaying average? Are they doing averaging?
There's like 7 or 8 different ways that people are calculating high school grades. Some of it is the last assessment, whatever you got at the end, that's what you got. Some of them are doing a decaying average, so the earlier stuff doesn't count as much as the later stuff.
Yeah.
There's power law, which is some crazy kind of calculation that comes out with a nice number, but it's hard to explain to anybody.
Yes.
There's just a straight average. So there's a lot of different ways that it can be done. I'm just curious how we're doing it.
Okay, I'll find that out for you. Andrea, maybe you know?
Yeah, the last that I knew, the way they were doing it is It's kind of based on if you're, say, have exemplary in 9 out of 10 standards, and then 1 is partial exemplary, then your overall grade would be exemplary. It has to do with how many exemplaries versus, how many just straight proficiencies. There's a calculation based on that. So you have to have so many, in the exemplary in order to get exemplary, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's a it's probably out there in the parent handbook.
Mm-hmm.
Because my kids always knew exactly what it was.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Andrea. All right. Are there any other questions or anything that I didn't clarify for anybody at this point? Josh.
Just back to my statement from earlier about going back to grades a little bit, just for the parents' sake, so we can kind of figure out where kids are at any given point. When we talk to the teacher, they can say, well, he's got a C in math right now. And I can say, well, we always got to work some more on that instead of waiting for the grades to be finalized out for the end of the quarter. I just find for parents, it'd be a lot easier for us to manage how our kids are doing in school, how much time they spend at home on a certain subject, what they study, so on and so forth. So I just wonder if that's even a possibility, and how are we going to manage that?
Yeah. And I think maybe, Josh, you're talking a lot about communications. How do we communicate with families to let them know where our students are, or where your students are, and what we need to do to move them to the next level, right? And I think that gets back to our example of what we were doing before with our, model, and Alice being the teacher. She wasn't just giving a grade out, right? She was really working that teacher role and asking those questions and providing those, reflection pieces to say, well, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And Chris using the rubric saying, all right, well, you were proficient because you showed the attributes of the sphere this way. So I think those are the pieces that are really important, is the communication piece. And what I'm hearing you saying is that sometimes that communication isn't as clear as what it could be when it comes home as a parent. And I think that's something we can work on, Chris.
Yeah, and Mary Ellen, I think it's just super important that we have to continue to just educate the community on how we assess students and what proficiency really means. Because I remember so clearly as a young teacher, when I was giving an A or a B to a student, the history teacher next door to me could have been giving an A and a B in a very, very different way. And kids got to know those grades meant different things depending upon if you had Miss Simmons or Mr. Hennessy as a teacher. It was very subjective. And the idea here is to get as much of the subjectivity out of this and just really focus on the kiddo's performance and what they're learning and how they demonstrate it. So, but nobody's saying this is really easy to do. As Renee said, there are a lot of different ways that can be assessed in terms of the reporting. So we just got to make sure we're doing it consistently so that the community can understand how their child's doing. Super important.
And maybe if we had more of those learning progressions in the hands of the families, you could see exactly where your child is and what they can do and what they need to do to move to the next level. We don't have those yet for every proficiency. Yes, Josh.
I just want to make it clear. It's not a matter of waiting for the grades to come out. I understand what the letters mean on the report cards. I'm talking about going before report card comes out, middle semester, middle quarter. I want to have that question, like, how are they doing where they're at right now? The answer I always get is like, oh, they're on track for the end of the year. Like, but are they doing as good as well as they really can do? It's like, do I have to put more time into that? That's my concern. That's the problem I've been having for years now, because I came from Derby. They had the same system, and it was just all confusion.
So what I'm hearing, I think, is it possible at the elementary and middle school level to have some sort of progress reports going out?
And some explanation of what that means as far as the student learning goes. Maybe it might be more helpful if we had those learning progressions that when the student reaches them, they go home to the families. So they're not waiting for the report card. They're sending them home right away. And so you, Josh, as a parent would know, oh, I see my student is working on this, but if they really want to go further, they can do this same exact skill, go deeper into it and do this to be distinguished. And you could even support them at home if you wanted to, or you could, support your child to, when you go to class, make sure that you're reaching for this distinguished level, because it's all written in student-friendly language and family-friendly language. that might be a tool, because if we're just doing more of the same, it might not be as clear to some families as to exactly where their student is at, right? Alice?
I have to leave
Oh,
because
okay.
of family obligations. Just as an item to just jump ahead for a item for a future agenda, that
Okay.
how does all of this proficiency based learning stack up against other schools, not only local but state and national, because our kids just don't deal with what going on in their schools, but they certainly are compared to kids in the state. And then if they go on to post-secondary education, they're compared to kids on a national level. So I thank you for that, and I do have to leave. Thank you very much.
See you, Alice.
Okay, anything more on the reporting system? All right, move on to old business. Is there any old business? No. Any other business? Items for a future agenda?
Other than what Alice was asking for, what is the comparison to what we're doing to other schools in the state and other schools in the nation? I think specifically she was addressing the proficiency systems.
I would like to see for a future agenda exactly how we're dealing with special needs kids. What are we teaching them while they're there the second, third, and fourth year after graduation?
So Tim, you're
Mary
talking
Ellen,
specifically about students.
Sorry, Renee, go ahead.
Tim, are you talking specifically about students with high needs?
Yes. So I have, Devin works for me. He was a graduate of Spalding. It was clear that he missed something. I don't know what it was. But I'm just curious to see what the criteria looks like for training some of these kids that have high needs so they can function in life when they leave the school.
Mary Ellen, I was going to ask, is Stacy Anderson scheduled to come to any?
I was just thinking that same thing when Tim said that. She is now.
She really should be. She really should be, because she's done a lot of this work in her career, Tim, and I know it's very, very close.
I appreciate what she's done in her career, but I'd really like to know what we're doing at Spalding.
No, that's what I mean. So that's why having her as our special ed director come and share this information, I think would be really helpful.
Thank
so
you,
that would
Tim.
be easy enough to do.
Thanks for bringing that up, Tim. Because I had actually meant to put that on the work plan, and I didn't. And so that's great that you said that, because that just reminded me.
Well, having a special needs child myself, I've heard from a good number of parents that have had complaints, but I don't really get it. And then I've, seen some what I would consider deficits, but I don't really understand that. So I'd like to hear more about what their evaluation process is and how they decide what to teach children so they can function in life.
Yes. So we'll put that on for a future agenda item. Thank you.
Tim, do you have anything else?
I would really like to see exactly what the criteria is and procedure is for any student that has identified above the herd mentality in school.
So I think what you're asking is for what things are in place for students to push them to their next level?
Yep. And I'd like to see what our procedure is for educating the parents so they'll know who to call the right person.
Tim, was that for students who are excelling, or is that for special needs? I'm not clear. I just want to make sure I get it right.
So I think he's
I'd say regular, any of them really. Anytime something's not hitting the standard in school, there should be a procedure for getting it corrected immediately.
Tim, you're cutting in and out.
And not hitting for immediately, not 6 weeks or a year from now. So we need to make sure that's nailed down.
I think you're too broken up. Maybe could you type something in the chat so I make sure I get it accurately, Tim?
We also have for future agenda items, the PD calendar for the year and allied arts. The art section is coming in October. So I just wanted to put that out there as future agenda.
So Andrea, I think I can summarize what Tim was saying in that he's curious about the students with high needs and what's the procedure for them, and then also for students who are excelling and how are they getting pushed to the next level.
Okay, I'll put that in there. Now I have for your future agendas, the one that Tim just added, and how does the proficiency-based grading stack up against the other schools statewide and nationwide? And I'm understanding I should just put those as TBD, to be determined.
Yes, because
And otherwise, we're going to be following the calendar until those are added. Well, then they'll be on the calendar. But for October, it's professional development and allied arts.
yes,
And whatever else is on the calendar.
yes.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we'll take these future agenda items and we'll add them in. So not to top load any one meeting, but to spread them out over time.
Okay. All right. So our next meeting is October 26th at 5:30. And Tim, unless you've got something else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can I second it since I'm the only one?
Yes, you're good. You're a committee member. You're good to go.
All right. Tim, you want to give me a
Thank
thumbs
you.
up if you're okay with adjourning? All right. Thank you.
Andrea, I'll email you because I can't figure out how to do chat.
Okay. And
Bye.
Mary Ellen, you're going to send me the video.
Yes, I will.
Thank you much. I think I've got all the participants. It was a small group.
Thank you, Andrea, for all you
All right,
do.
everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Night,
Have a good
everybody.
night.
Bye.